Hey there. Hey ladies, how you doing? Hey Miss Gray. All right. So tonight I am going to be talking about guardianship. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I don't know why I'm getting a little bit of lagging on my end. I am good. I just want to make sure that I can hear you guys. Okay. Bear with me one moment, y'all. All righty. All right. It is 8 o'clock and I am going to get started. So tonight we are going to talk about guardianship. And, and I don't know why I'm getting this feedback. Are you guys hearing feedback on your end? Miss K, is there feedback? All right. Well, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If you can't, just drop it in the comments for me and let me know that you can't. And so tonight we'll be talking about garden. Okay. I am Crystal. You said you cannot hear me? All right. Well, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm having some technical difficulties tonight. So, for those of you that don't know me, hopefully you do, I am Danette Taylor, and I am an advocate as well as a parent coach. And so tonight, those of you guys that have children with disabilities, I'll be sharing with you guys about guardianship. And so, if you don't know what guardianship is, so guardianship is the process that I don't know why I'm getting this. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know why I'm getting this feedback. Um, uh, Miss K, can you let me know if you can hear me? All right. So guardianship is actually a court process, and it's for children with disabilities as well as adult with disabilities. But my focus on this conversation is about children. So a lot of us have children with disabilities, and we often wonder, well, what happens when they turn 18? And for some of our babies, they're going to be just fine. They're going to be able to live fully independent lives, and there won't be any issues at all. And then we have some that'll be on the far spectrum, um, where they're going to need some significant care, right? And so they won't have any sense of independence. And pretty much all decisions will have to be made for them. And so there's also everybody in between as well. So some of our babies will need some support, maybe in some areas and not so much in others. But as it relates to guardianship, it's specifically for those that need a significant amount um, of care and they're unable to make decisions on their own. So, one of the things that I want to make sure that parents know is that, especially my autism community, autism moms out there, we need to make sure that we don't make the assumption that just because our child is autistic or even just because they have a disability, that we don't assume that guardianship is the right thing for them. So, one of the things that people need to understand is that with guardianship actually takes away your child's right once they're 18, right? And so, typically, when you turn 18, you're grown. At least that's what they think. When you're 18, you're grown. But the law says that you're an adult, and you have control over your life. But when you have guardianship over your child, also known as the ward in the court system, that individual can't get married, they can't sign contracts, they can't consent to any type of medical treatment, they can't establish a residence, they can't file any legal action against anyone, with the exception of the guardian. That can't happen. But essentially, when you think about those things, what you realize is that almost all of your rights are gone, right? And so you want to make sure that you don't put your child in a position where you take away all of their rights unless you absolutely need to. And so with guardianship, there is full guardianship where pretty much everything I just mentioned to you, your child will lose at 18. But there's also limited guardianship. And so one of the major pieces of limited guardianship, it relates to finances. And when you talk about really taking someone's rights to their finances, whether or not it be income, assets, and so forth, that specifically refers to what we call conservatorship. And so conservatorship really says that you can handle everything else, but you can't handle your money, right? And so I think the biggest thing that we know about, or I should say person that we know about that had conservatorship recently, or I shouldn't say recently, but I think she just got it back, but was Britney Spears. And so remember, I don't know if you guys remember when her dad basically took control over her, all of her income, all of her assets, everything. So that is what conservatorship is. And so with conservatorship, again, you have no control of your finances, but if you need to control anything else for your child, that falls under guardianship. Now, there is a way that you don't have to take all of your child's rights, right? So let's just say you realize that, okay, well, my child is incapable of handling their money, and I also don't think that my child is ready to or can handle, having a residence and establishing a residence, maintaining a home, all of those things. Well, you could do limited guardianship and you would have the right to control their finances and their money. And then you would also have the ability to tell them where they could live. You would establish their home for them. Eventually, they would live with you, right? So there is a way that you don't necessarily have to all of their rights, but there are also other alternatives to guardianship, especially if you don't feel like, you need to take all of your child's rights. Um, One of the things that want to make sure people also understand about guardianship is that as the guardian, the courts are very clear about you're supposed to still include the child in certain decision making to the greatest extent possible that they have. So obviously they have certain limitations. For example, if they have an IQ that puts them in like the severe or profound range, maybe IQs in the 40s or 30s or something like that, then you know that they're probably not going to be capable of making certain decisions. Um, but you want to make sure that it's not a matter of now you have control and they're able to make some decisions, but you give them absolutely no choices. That should still be happening. I've had a couple of people reach out to me in the past week or so asking me about guardianship once their child is already 18. Now, I want to say this has to be considered long before your child turns 18. Long before your child turns 18. Your child should not be, 17 and a half, and you're just now considering, you know, whether or not you want to um, look at guardianship because it's a process. It's not something you go to the courthouse and sign up for. There's a whole process that requires you to file a petition in probate court in the county that your loved one lives in or you live in. It also requires you to have an evaluation done, and that evaluation is actually set by the courts. It also requires you to provide notice to the person, so notice to your child that you're trying to petition the courts for guardianship for them. You also have to have a hearing, and that hearing comes after notice is sent and evaluation is done, and then the courts finally decide. One important thing that families need to know about this is that there has to be an attorney that represents your child, right? So it just can't be your attorney. It's also an attorney that's in some states, the attorney is appointed to your child or your ward. In other states, you have to pay for that second attorney. So again, in some states, you have to pay for two attorneys, one for yourself and then one for your child. And then in some states, you pay for your attorney and then the courts actually assign an attorney. When guardianship is decided, the judge decides how long this will be. So the judge may decide that it may only be needed for 3 years, 6 months, 10 years, or you may even say it's indefinitely, but that is decided by the court. One of the things that you have to do when you file, but when you have guardianship, is that you're required to file annual reports based on the situation with your loved one. And so that's one of the things that people often forget. It's not a one and done type of situation. There are annual filings that also have to be done. I know somebody asked me about doing the guardianship process yourself. It can be done on your own, but there are some courts that won't entertain you when you file a petition on your own. The judge will tell you, well, you need to get an attorney. It's not an easy thing to do. It's very tedious. It's a lot of paperwork. There are a lot of steps in the process. So I always recommend people getting an attorney if you can afford one. The only problem is that, it's costly, right? So when I looked into guardianship 5 years ago for my son, it was $5,000 for the attorney guardianship. Now, granted, depending on where you live, it may cost a little bit more, it may be a little bit less, but nonetheless, it's a couple of $thousands. Now, for some people, they may want to do it themselves, but you have to be very careful because once the decision is made, you cannot come back to petition the court again for at least another 2 years. Okay. Hey, Warrior Wonder. So, when you should start the process, the actual process of file a petition to the court for guardianship, 17. 17 is the age, but I do want to caution you because in some states and in some courts, the process will take a whole lot longer than a year. So you want to call your probate courts and just ask the clerk there, the clerk of courts there, how long is the process taking? But on an average, it's by the age of 17. So the minute your child turns 17, you should definitely be looking at starting the process to file for guardianship. Thank you for that question. Um, so again, I want to make sure that everybody understands that guardianship is really for the most severe of cases. Your child should not have the ability to make decisions when you're considering guardianship. Um, it's one of those things where, especially as a mom, and you guys know, we can be a little bit emotional sometimes. We don't wanna let go, and we're afraid, and we don't want certain things to happen. But the reality is that regardless of our child's disability, if they're able to make some decisions, you're not going to want to necessarily take all their rights. And obviously, it's on a case by case basis, and you have to do what's best for your family. But it's something where you don't want to let your emotions get in the way, and you really want to be extremely logical about it because it's one of those decisions that has a lasting effect. And especially if that guardianship is for a lifetime, the reality is that it's very difficult to undo once it's done. Um, I don't know why I'm still hearing that feedback. One of the things that you can actually consider, depending on the level of functioning of your child, um, is power of attorney, which is also available, as well as supported decision making. And I'm not going to get into that tonight, but I do want to make it clear that there are other options. The main difference with those other options is that they're not necessarily a court proceeding, even though supported decision making does have some legislation behind it in about 20 different states. I know not in Georgia, but in many states they do. But the main difference is that your child still has control over their life with power of attorney as well as supported decision making, but not with guardianship. Unless, of course, you do limited guardianship where they still have control over certain things. Um, Making sure that, you know, you have this conversation if your child has the ability to even remotely understand like what this means. You really want to have this conversation with them because a lot of times we think that in our minds we think that our kids are not ready for adulthood, and many of them are not, but they are looking forward to it. They're looking forward to being an adult. um, I know I had a lady reach out to me recently that mentioned that her daughter is 18 or 19 years old and she didn't do guardianship. And now her daughter's kind of like running wild and doesn't manage her SSI check, those types of things. And so those are things that you don't want to happen, but you want to make sure that you have that conversation with your child because if you realize that you're not going to be able to rein them in and help them to make decisions and they're not going to allow you to help them make those decisions, then that's something you definitely want to make sure that you put in place because the last thing you want to do is have an individual that spends all of their money on whatever and then doesn't want to pay their rent and so forth. Can I get medical guardianship for my grandson without a parent? Angels 561. No, you because when you file for guardianship, well, let me go back. If you file for guardianship before the individual turns 18 years old, it has to be done by a parent or a guardian. Once the individual is 18 years old, you can do it then. But if all you're wanting is medical guardianship, then you also have the option of power of attorney, um, but that can be revoked by your loved one, by your grandson. But there are other options. Um, okay, got it. Yes, ma'am. Then yes, you can. Yes, you can. So if your daughter passed away, you definitely can do that because I'm assuming you are your grandson's guardian, correct? And so anyone can file for guardianship for someone, but not if they currently have a parent and they're still a minor. They are minor. But once they are 18, yes, you can. Or if you are the guardian, yes, you can also file for guardianship. And that's a really good one, Angels 561, because a lot of our kids really don't understand the importance of making medical decisions. And so those medical decisions are, they're complex for those of us that don't even have a disability. And so if you don't believe that your loved one is going to give you power of attorney, like medical power of attorney, then yeah, definitely guardianship would be something you want to consider. Absolutely, yes, ma'am. And so the dad can be a part of the process, but the courts can make you the guardian over the medical decisions. And so I know that many of you guys have kids, grandkids with disabilities, and you probably want to know a little bit more about all of the options available. And so on Thursday, July 11th, I think it is, I am doing a webinar on this topic, but I'll also be covering power of attorney as well as supported decision making. And more importantly, I'll also be talking about, how to choose which one would be right for you and kind of giving you some guidance on the things that you should consider as it relates to making a decision for guardianship, for power of attorney, or for supported decision making. Okay, can a sister be a guardian for in case of emergency while both parents are alive? Okay, so Marlette, I want to be clear on your question. And so this is not about a guardian necessarily. This is about guardianship, which is very different. So this guardianship process is specifically um, it's indicated by the court who would be the guardian. So somebody just can't fill in under guardianship because everything is dictated by the court. Yes, Angels 561. So yes, that definitely can work with the notarized letter while he is a minor, right? But once he turns 18, those notarized letters no longer work for anything. The schools will continue to um, accommodate you even after he turns 18, up to 22 if he's in school that long. However, rights, even in the school system, rights transfer to the child the minute they hit 18, even if they didn't graduate yet. And so that's something else that you guys should also keep in mind. The schools are pretty good though about telling you that through the IEP process, that once your child turns 18, that rights transfer to them. And basically, the child now has to give permission for you to attend those IEP meetings. So if any of you guys are actually interested in attending that webinar that I'll be doing, um, you can actually go to the link in my bio and you'll be able to see a link that says Guardianship webinar, I believe is what I have it as, and you'll be able to sign up there. You can also go to bit.ly /18SOS. I'm going to put it in the chat for us. Um, so yeah, you can also go there as well if you're interested in attending. All righty. So you said so go to court with that letter. So even if you go to court with that letter as it relates to guardianship, that's a completely different process. You would have to petition the courts to have rights over him for those medical decisions. So that still means that you'll have to do the petition. You'll still have to provide official notice to your grandson that you're trying to get guardianship over him as an adult, because this is guardianship after age 18. You'll also have to make sure that you follow all of the processes the court tells you to, unless you get an attorney, which is a lot easier to do it that way. But you also, in that process, they will have an evaluation done. So a letter in and of itself from the dad doesn't count towards guardianship, because again, this is saying that you need to make decisions for your grandson after age 18. And regardless of, being a parent or not, every child, once they turn 18, is technically an adult. And so, regardless of their disability, regardless of the severity of their disability, when they hit 18, they are an adult. And so, if they're in a position where they're not going to be able to do certain things on their own, you definitely want to consider some of those, or at least one of those options, whether or not it's guardianship, conservatorship, power of attorney, or supported decision making. Yes, ma'am. So you're starting early to do your research, and that's good, because that's exactly what you want to do. So many people, they do not look into this, and they're like, okay, well, I have time, I've got time, my child is only 8 years old. But we get so caught up with everyday life, like we forget that things don't always happen very quickly, and guardianship is one of those things that takes months to do, and in some counties, up to a year or more. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, well, I am going to say goodnight to everybody, and I thank you guys for coming on. And again, if you're interested, I'll be doing a live webinar on July 8th. I'm sorry, no, July 11th, Thursday, July 11th, in regards to guardianship, conservatorship, power of attorney, um, supported decision making, and how to actually walk yourself through the process to decide which is best for your loved one. And this will be July 11th at 7 p.m. All righty, everybody, have a good night.